You always have to make everything about you, don't you? That's what my father whispered, low, calm, like he didn't want anyone else to hear, as I stood beside the framed portrait of my grandfather, delivering a eulogy I'd stayed up 3 nights perfecting. Not thank you. Not you spoke beautifully, Elaine. Just that. The words landed like a gut punch. And I think that was the point. Let me back up. My name is Elaine Carter. I'm 24 years old, the oldest of three. First in the family to finish college, first to get into law school, and now, apparently, the first to be accused of selfishness at her own grandfather's funeral for speaking aloud the truth that no one else had the courage to say. It happened in the church hall. Rows of plastic chairs, stale floral arrangements, and the faint scent of musty hymnals. I wore a simple black dress and clasped my speech with trembling fingers. I wasn't planning on saying much. Just a few words about Papa James, the man who taught me to read by flashlight during power outages, who mailed me $20 bills tucked in crossword puzzles from the Sunday Times, who believed I'd argue in front of the Supreme Court one day even when I couldn't afford a meal plan in college. I stood at the lectern and looked into the crowd. Most of them weren't listening. They were there for the potluck afterward. But I still spoke. Papa James taught me that the loudest kind of love is consistency, I said. And even though his knees gave out long ago, he never missed a parent-teacher night, a school play, or a single court mock trial. I paused, looked to the front row. My mother blinked slowly, unreadable. My sister scrolled silently on her phone. And my father, he looked annoyed. When the service ended, people clapped gently, awkwardly. I stepped down and found myself walking toward the doors, just trying to breathe again. That's when my father followed. "Why'd you have to make it about you?" he hissed, straightening his tie like I'd embarrassed him. This was supposed to be about him. It took every ounce of strength not to snap. "I was talking about him," I said softly. "Yeah, well," he scoffed. "Next time, try leaving your resume out of it."
My résumé.
That's what he heard. Not love. Not memory. Just a threat to his ego. I bit my tongue. I smiled. I nodded, because that's what I'd always done. Keep the peace. Don't stir. Make it small. Swallow the lump in your throat, like a bitter pill. But this time, it lodged there. We drove home in silence. The kind of silence that screams. My little brother, David, stared out the window. My mom tapped through emails. And me? I stared at my lap, reading the folded copy of my eulogy like it had betrayed me. I knew that tone. That accusation. That sting. It wasn't new. It had been seeded years ago in tiny, dismissive comments. Well, someone thinks she's better than the rest of us. Not everyone gets a trophy just for trying, Elaine. What do you want, a parade? They said it like a joke. But the message was clear. Keep your wins to yourself. Stay small enough to fit inside their comfort. I grew up in a brick duplex on the west side of Allentown, Pennsylvania. My father, Darrell Carter, worked construction. My mom, Vanessa, managed a pediatric dental office. Money was tight. Love even tighter. Papa James was the only one who noticed when I started writing essays for fun in middle school. The only one who cheered when I won the state debate finals. The only one who mailed me a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird with a note that said, "Don't just read about justice, sweetheart. Chase it." He came to every event. Sat in the front row, knees aching, with a folded newspaper and butterscotch candies in his pocket. When I got into Temple University, he called every week just to hear how my classes were going. My parents didn't. I used to pretend they were busy. That they showed love differently. That if I just excelled enough, they'd turn around and finally clap. But they didn't turn around. They turned away. And now, standing in the house I grew up in, surrounded by old photos and cold coffee, I realized something. I didn't feel like a daughter. I felt like a stranger wearing their last name. That night, while the rest of the family gathered in the living room to watch TV, I sat on the back steps with Papa's old watch in my hand. It was cheap, scratched, barely ticking. But it was the only thing of his I asked to keep. As I stared at it, I remembered what he once said to me. "You can't change how they see you, kiddo. But you can decide how you see yourself." That's when it hit me. I'd spent years trying to earn applause from people who only clapped when it was convenient, who only loved the version of me that kept her head down. But Papa? He saw all of me. And he clapped every damn time. I didn't cry that night. Not then.
But I did decide something.
The next morning, I bought a bus ticket.
To where?
Washington, D.C., a city I'd only ever dreamed of. A law internship I'd applied to months ago, thinking it was a long shot. And an acceptance email I hadn't told anyone about. They didn't ask what I was doing with my life. So I didn't tell them. But I was done asking for permission to be proud. Done shrinking to fit the frame they built for me. And so I packed my suitcase. I left a note on the kitchen table. Thank you for the roof. But I've outgrown the ceiling. Elaine. Then I walked away. Not because I hated them, but because I finally loved myself enough to leave. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. The bus rumbled to life beneath me, a tired groan of rubber and steel, as the lights of Allentown blurred into the early morning fog. I didn't look back. Not because I was brave. Because I couldn't afford to. If I turned around, I might freeze. I might fold. And I wasn't folding. Not anymore. I found an empty seat near the back, pressed my backpack against the window, and clutched the watch Papa James left me like it could anchor me to this decision. Washington, D.C. wasn't just a place. It was a possibility. A law internship with the nonprofit voices of youth justice. 12 weeks of fieldwork, mentorship, advocacy training, unpaid, of course, but it came with a stipend for housing. I'd applied in secret during my last semester of undergrad. Never thought I'd get it. When the acceptance email came, I cried on the library floor between stacks of textbooks. Then I closed the tab and didn't tell a soul. Because I already knew what the reaction would be. You're moving for a volunteer job? Must be nice to play around while we're out here working real hours. Who's paying your rent? Mississippi Supreme Court. So, I kept it to myself. Like most good things. The bus ride was 5 hours of silence and diesel fumes. I scrolled through photos on my phone, Papa smiling in his recliner, the acceptance letter, a screenshot of the DC Metro map. Halfway through the ride, I got a text from my sister. Where did you go? Mom says you just disappeared. I didn't respond. Then another came 5 minutes later.
She's pissed. Dad, too.
You could have at least said goodbye. I stared at the screen. Said goodbye? To what? The silence? The half-claps? The way they looked through me unless they needed someone to babysit or fix the Wi-Fi. I turned off my phone. I needed peace more than I needed explanations. By the time we pulled into Union Station, the sun had dipped behind gray clouds, casting the city in soft gold and shadows. I stepped off the bus and breathed in the air, humid, electric, alive. This wasn't home. Not yet. But it didn't reject me on arrival. A woman in a green windbreaker stood near the terminal exit, holding a cardboard sign that read, VOYJ intern pickup, Elaine. That small, crooked sign nearly undid me.
Because someone expected me.
Someone said my name without scorn attached. Her name was Patrice. Middle-aged, quick-witted, drove a beat-up sedan that smelled like citrus and lavender. She handed me a bottle of water and a folded map as soon as I got in the car. You're assigned to the shared apartment in Bloomingdale, she said. It's old, but the AC works, and the last intern left some pantry staples. You vegetarian? No, I said quietly.
Cool.
There's leftover tuna and crackers. Knock yourself out. She smiled, and I smiled back, tentative but real. The apartment was 3 stories tall, red brick, ivy clinging to the railings. My room was upstairs, bare bones, a twin bed, a metal desk, one narrow window. But it was mine. I unpacked slowly. 1 suitcase, 1 bag, 1 photo of Papa in a frame I'd wrapped in a hoodie for protection. I placed it on the desk and whispered, We made it, Papa. The next morning was orientation. There were 9 of us in the program, mostly grad students, 2 undergrads, 1 recent dropout named Simone who introduced herself by saying, I believe in policy change and breakfast burritos. In that order. I liked her immediately. They gave us binders, schedules, name tags. We were expected to shadow court hearings, attend strategy sessions, and spend afternoons tutoring kids who'd aged out of foster care. I didn't feel ready. But for once, that didn't scare me. What scared me was the feeling that I finally was where I belonged, and no one in my life would ever know it. At lunch, I sat alone on a stone bench in the courtyard, picking at a soggy wrap. Simone plopped down beside me uninvited, 2 apples in her hand. She offered me one. "You looked like you needed a snack," she said. I took it. "Thanks." We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. It was the first time in months I'd sat beside someone and not felt like I had to prove I deserved the seat. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I sat at my desk with Papa's watch in my palm and opened my laptop. No new texts. No missed calls. Except one. A voicemail from my dad. I hovered over the play button.
Clicked. Elaine.
"Your mother's upset. I'm not saying what you did was right, but if you're safe, just text her. That's all." That was it. No warmth. No curiosity. No pride. Just a request. A demand wrapped in a shrug. I deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of necessity. Because for the first time, I wasn't shrinking myself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. And that felt like the beginning of something. By the end of my first week in DC, I had learned 3 things. The buses are always late, but the people never stop rushing. Canned soup can stretch across 3 meals if you believe in yourself. Even when you leave home, the weight of it packs itself into your suitcase anyway. Our internship schedule at Voices of Youth Justice was intense. 8-hour days filled with courtroom shadowing, research briefings, and volunteer rotations. But the work? The work meant something. Tuesday morning, we sat in on a juvenile sentencing hearing for a boy named Isaiah. 16. Brown skin, tight braids, and eyes that looked too old for his face. He was being sentenced for stealing headphones from a gas station. No weapon. No violence. Just hunger and impulse and probably a whole lot of pain. He stood beside a public defender who didn't say a word during the whole hearing. The judge didn't ask about his circumstances. He didn't ask if Isaiah had eaten that day or if anyone had ever taught him how to ask for help. He just launched into a 30-minute speech about choices and accountability. "You've got to decide who you want to be," the judge said, pointing. "This is your moment to grow up." Isaiah nodded, said nothing. I watched his hands, clenched, then relaxed, then clenched again. When it ended, he was handed a court order, a mandated program, and a curfew bracelet. No one asked if he had a ride home. No one walked out with him. Afterward, Patrice pulled us aside. "What did you notice?" she asked. Simone raised her hand. That the judge spoke more than the defendant. "Exactly," Patrice said. "Power shows up in who holds the mic. But justice? Justice shows up in who's allowed to speak." I wrote that down in my notebook and underlined it twice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Isaiah. About how many times I'd stood in front of someone, too afraid to speak because I already knew how they saw me. Not brilliant, not bold, just too much. Or not enough. Or a problem they didn't know how to love. My father used to say, "Don't talk back unless you've got a better way to pay the bills." That was his way of ending conversations. His way of telling me that my voice was only valuable if it made him comfortable. I'd internalized that for years. Speak softly. Don't shine too bright. Don't name the pain unless you're ready to justify it. But sitting in that courtroom, watching a boy treated like a burden before he even had a chance to explain himself, I felt something shift. On Friday, we were split into teams for a weekend community outreach project. Simone and I were paired with Marcus, one of the counselors who worked with court-involved youth. He was tall, maybe in his late 30s, with soft eyes and a quiet way of commanding attention. We spent the morning canvassing in Southeast, visiting rec centers, barbershops, corner stores, asking residents what they believed the youth in the area really needed. Some said more after-school programs. Others said job training, mentorship, trauma counselors. One grandmother, Miss Paulette, sat us down on her front porch and handed us cold bottles of root beer. These kids need more people who don't give up after the first no, she said. More folks who stay after the cameras leave. Marcus nodded respectfully. That's what we're trying to build. She turned to me, eyes sharp behind thick glasses. And you, baby? You in this for real, or just until grad school kicks in? The question caught me off guard. I took a breath. I'm in this for real. She studied me for a second, then smiled.
Good.
We need people like you. We need people like you. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until I got back to the apartment and stood in front of the mirror repeating it to myself. We need people like you. Not you're too intense. Not you always have to be the smart one. Not you think you're better than everyone. Just, we need you. That night, Simone knocked on my door holding a beat-up shoebox. Cupcake emergency, she said. Inside were 4 lopsided vanilla cupcakes from a corner bakery and a pack of dollar store birthday candles. It's my half-birthday, she explained, lighting one and sticking it into a cupcake. Which means we eat sugar and scream into pillows. I laughed genuinely. Is that a rule? It is now. We sat cross-legged on my rug, licking frosting and sharing stories we hadn't told anyone else. She told me about the time her mother asked if therapy had made her soft. I told her about Papa James and about the funeral and about my father whispering, "Why do you have to make it about you?" Simone didn't look shocked. She just nodded like she understood. You know that wasn't about you, right? She said. I blinked. Then what was it? People project their bruises, she said. They punish you for not shrinking because they're still living in cages you outgrew.
I didn't reply.
I just swallowed the last bite of cupcake and stared at the blank wall across from me. Simone stood up, stretched, and peeled a sticky note from her backpack. She wrote 5 words. You don't have to earn being seen. She slapped it onto my desk lamp. That's your new truth, she said, grinning. Write it on your heart. 3 days later, I was reorganizing my notebook and found Kennedy's drawing again, a portrait she'd sketched of me standing behind a podium, arms open like I was delivering a TED Talk. I'd met her briefly at an elementary school where we did a youth rights workshop. I hadn't even remembered what I said, but she had.
And she remembered me.
I stuck the drawing above my desk, right next to Simone's sticky note. And then I looked in the mirror. Not for makeup. Not to criticize. Just to see myself. I didn't see someone who was too loud, too proud, too ambitious.
I saw someone who was still standing.
And maybe for now, that was enough. The morning started like any other. I was scrubbing marker stains off a folding table at the community center, humming under my breath, still replaying Kennedy's little grin from the day before when she handed me a second drawing, this one of a courtroom with hearts floating above it. You talk like people are listening, she'd said shyly. That line stayed with me, because for the first time in years, I believed it might be true. It was a Thursday. The sky was a smudged watercolor of gray. Simone was leading a budgeting workshop for teens in the next room, and Marcus was on a conference call about expanding our mentorship program. The day felt full of purpose, full of motion. And then my phone buzzed in my back pocket.
Mom.
The name lit up like a flare in a cave. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. Not since the funeral. Not since I left the note on the table and boarded a bus without warning. I stared at the screen for several seconds, debating. Let it go to voicemail? Pretend I didn't see it? But something in me, maybe a leftover reflex, maybe that same old ache, answered anyway. Hello. There was a pause, then her voice, soft, familiar, and deceptively casual. Hey, baby. You busy? I looked around the room. The wipe-down table, the faint laughter through the wall. I'm at work, I said. What's going on? I was just thinking about you, she said. You haven't called. I bit back the first response that came to mind. I've been settling in, I said carefully. Well, she continued, I'm glad you're doing okay. I saw on Facebook that you're with some justice group?
Some justice group.
Like it was a book club or a summer hobby. Yeah, I said simply. It's called Voices of Youth Justice. I'm interning there through the fall. Emicham, she replied. Good, good. Another pause. Then, Actually, I was calling because the car broke down yesterday. Your father says it's the transmission and the mechanic wants $600. But we don't have that kind of cash right now. There it was. The real reason. I knew it before she said it. I'd felt the shift in her tone. The way her voice got sweeter before the ask. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Well, I figured you might be able to help. Just something to float us until payday. I know you're in the city now. Things must be going good. I sat down on the nearest chair, heart sinking. I hadn't even received my first stipend check. I'd been living off savings, microwave rice, and granola bars from the donation pantry. My shoes had a hole in the sole I'd been ignoring for a week. Mom, I don't have anything to spare right now, I said gently. I just got here. I'm still getting stable myself. A beat of silence. Then her tone shifted.
Wow. Okay.
I guess we know where your priorities are. I closed my eyes. It's not about priorities, I said. It's about survival. You're always so dramatic, Elaine. You've always made things bigger than they are. Bigger than they are. Like the time I got into the honors program and she said, "That's nice, but your sister's the one who really needs help right now." Like when I won that regional essay contest and she asked if I'd remembered to vacuum the stairs. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I hope you get the car fixed, I said quietly.
Yeah, well.
Don't strain yourself.
Click.
She hung up. No goodbye. No, I love you. Just a guilt grenade dropped into my day like a smoke bomb. I sat there for a long time, staring at the floor, phone still in my lap. It wasn't about the $600. It never was. It was about what I represented. An escape, a choice she never gave herself permission to make. And maybe my independence felt like betrayal. But I wasn't the one who turned away. I was just the one who finally walked. Still, the guilt twisted in my gut like barbed wire. I thought of Papa James, of his stories, of how he used to press a quarter into my palm and say, "You can't save the world if you forget to feed yourself first." And I realized my mother wasn't calling me to reconnect. She was calling for relief. And I wasn't a relief fund. Not anymore. That night, I stayed late at the center. Simone found me wiping down dry erase boards long after everyone else had gone. "You okay?" she asked. I didn't lie. I just handed her my phone and let her read the call log. She didn't need details. She just sat beside me on the floor and said, saying no to someone who trained you to always say yes? That's a radical act. I nodded, but my eyes stung anyway. She's still my mom, I whispered. Simone didn't flinch.
Yeah, she said.
But you're still your own person. Later that night, I sat on my bed with a blank sheet of paper. I wasn't ready to write a letter. Not to her. But I was ready to write to me.
So I did.
Dear Elaine, you are not selfish. You are not cold. You are not wrong for protecting your peace. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to keep your hands open for the right things. And when people confuse boundaries with betrayal, that's not your burden to fix.
Love.
The version of you who sees everything they tried to ignore. I folded the letter and slipped it into my notebook between Kennedy's sketch and Simone's sticky note. And when I turned off the lights, I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel cruel. I felt still, like I had just locked a door and swallowed the key. Not in spite, in protection. Because the version of me I was becoming, she deserved peace. The next morning, I woke up with Simone's words echoing in my head. Saying no to someone who trained you to always say yes? That's a radical act. Radical. Not selfish. Not disrespectful. Not ungrateful. Radical. I repeated it in my mind like a chant as I poured my instant coffee into a chipped mug in the kitchen. I hadn't spoken to my mom since the call, and part of me was still bracing for follow-up. Another text, a voicemail, even a jab from my sister in the group chat. But nothing came. Just silence. And silence, I was learning, could be both peaceful and punishing. Still, I went to work. That Friday was the kickoff for our first Voices Rising workshop series, an 8-week program we were launching for middle school girls to build confidence, self-advocacy, and creative expression. The idea had been mine. Patrice had approved it without hesitation. And I'd spent the past 2 weeks designing every worksheet, activity, and journal prompt myself. It was the first time anyone had trusted me with something this big. And I wanted to get it right. By 3 p.m., the community center classroom was buzzing. 12 girls filed in, some giggling, some glued to their phones, others awkwardly clutching their backpacks like armor. Simone passed out name tags while I arranged colored pens on the supply table. Kennedy was there, of course. She ran straight up to me and handed me another drawing, a superhero this time. "It's you," she said. "But, like, if you had wings." I blinked at the sketch. Me with a cape, arms outstretched, floating above the Capitol building. I crouched beside her. "Wings, huh?" She nodded. "Because you're always helping people fly." I swallowed hard. "Thank you, Kennedy. I really needed that today."
She didn't ask why.
She just smiled and took a seat near the window. The workshop began with a simple question. "What does confidence look like to you?" The answers trickled out slowly. "A girl who talks loud. Someone who doesn't care what people think. A person who gets good grades." Kennedy raised her hand. "Confidence is when you believe in yourself even when nobody else does." That made the whole room go quiet.
And me?
I nearly lost it, because in that moment, I realized I wasn't just teaching these girls. I was healing alongside them. After the workshop, I stayed late to help Simone clean up. She was humming under her breath, stacking chairs, when she paused and looked at me. "You okay?" I hesitated.
Yeah.
"Just tired." She didn't push, just nodded, and went back to collecting pens. But that wasn't the full truth. I wasn't just tired. I was stretched thin, emotionally raw, quietly unraveling. Because even though I was building something beautiful, I was still carrying the wreckage of what I'd walked away from. That night, I sat on my bed, laptop open, staring at a blank email draft addressed to my father. I had no intention of sending it, but I needed to write it. "Dear Dad, you always told me that talking back was disrespectful, that speaking up was making it about me. But here's the thing. I wasn't trying to be seen instead of Papa. I was trying to honor him by showing how much he saw me. And maybe that's what you never understood. Papa didn't make love conditional. He didn't wait for me to earn it. He just showed up. And maybe I'm still learning how to do that for myself. But I'm not sorry for the words I said. I'm just sorry you didn't hear them." I closed the laptop and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Writing it didn't fix anything, but it softened something in me. And sometimes softening is a kind of strength too. The next day, a surprise was waiting for me at the center. Marcus handed me an envelope addressed to Ms. Elaine Carter. No return label. No stamp. Inside was a photo. It was from the workshop. Someone had taken a candid shot of me laughing, hands midair, surrounded by a half-circle of smiling girls. My eyes were crinkled bright. My posture open.
Free.
On the back, someone had written, "You are becoming the kind of adult you always needed."
I stared at it for a long time.
I didn't know who had written it. Maybe Patrice. Maybe Simone. Maybe someone else. But I pinned it on the corkboard above my desk, right next to Kennedy's superhero drawing and Simone's sticky note. That corner of my wall was starting to look like a shrine to becoming. That evening, as I walked home through the warm twilight, I passed a young woman sitting on a bench outside the metro stop. She was crying quietly into her hands. Everyone else walked past her, eyes averted, earbuds in. I didn't know her. I didn't know what she was going through. But I sat beside her and didn't say a word. Eventually, she looked up. Our eyes met, and she gave me the smallest nod. That was it. Just presence. Just witness. Sometimes, that's all we can offer each other. And sometimes that's enough. Later that night, Simone found me on the fire escape outside our apartment, knees hugged to my chest, eyes on a moon. She handed me a cup of mint tea. "You did good today," she said. "I feel like I'm breaking open and holding it together at the same time," I admitted. She sipped her tea. "You are." We sat in silence, watching the city lights flicker on. "You ever wonder," I asked, "if the people who hurt us even realize they're the reason we had to get strong in the first place?" Simone exhaled. Sometimes. But then I remember. She looked over at me. Even strong girls need soft places to land. I didn't cry that night. But I did sleep with my window open, the city breeze in my room, and that photo above my bed like a lighthouse. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't dream of running. I dreamed of staying. The flyer was stapled to the corkboard by the kitchen. Fall Community Youth Showcase. October 14th, 6 p.m. Featuring Voices Rising, youth advocates, and student creators. I stared at it in disbelief. My name was listed under Keynote Highlights in bold, slightly crooked font. Elaine Carter, Program Lead, VOYJ Workshop Facilitator. It was the first time my name had ever been printed on anything without me having to beg for it. I didn't ask for recognition this time. I didn't pitch myself. They simply saw me. Simone found me in the hallway, blinking at the flyer like I wasn't sure it was real. She nudged me with her elbow.
Told you.
Wings. I smiled, but part of me still didn't know how to hold joy without bracing for the crash. Over the next 2 weeks, everything became a blur of preparation. The girls in our workshop were buzzing with ideas for their presentations, spoken word pieces, a skit, a visual art display. Kennedy was working on a monologue she'd written herself about what it meant to grow up in between things. In between loud and invisible, she said. That's how I feel most days. I helped her fine-tune the rhythm and cadence while she sat cross-legged on the floor, purple marker in her teeth, rewriting lines with fearless honesty. You're brave, I told her. She didn't look up. I'm just trying to sound like you. The words hit me harder than I expected, because I'd spent so long trying to sound like someone worthy of being listened to, and now someone else was modeling their voice on mine. The showcase felt like a storm cloud of nerves and pride. I practiced my speech every night after work. I wanted it to be perfect, not for the audience, for the girl I used to be, the one who stood on stage while her mother waited by the door, keys in hand, already halfway gone. This time, I would speak for her. The night of the showcase arrived. The community center was filled wall-to-wall with families, staff, neighborhood volunteers, and more kids than I'd ever seen in one room. Paper lanterns hung from the ceiling. Rows of folding chairs wrapped around the performance space. The girls from our workshop stood near the front, dressed in everything from sparkly sneakers to borrowed blazers. I wore a fitted navy suit, one I found at a thrift store 2 weeks prior, and a pair of flats I'd been saving for something special. When they called my name, the crowd clapped politely. And then I stepped up to the mic. Good evening, I began, voice trembling just slightly. My name is Elaine Carter, and for most of my life, I thought the best way to be strong was to stay small, to take up less space, to earn love through silence and service. A pause. A few parents leaned forward. But then I met girls like these, who show up even when they're scared, who write poems about pain and hope and survival before they've even finished 8th grade. And I realized something. I looked toward Kennedy. Strength isn't about swallowing your voice. It's about learning how to use it. And these girls? They're already louder than I ever was. Scattered applause. A few nods. A teacher wiped her eyes. I stepped down and Kennedy stepped up, holding her pages with both hands like they might fly away. Her voice cracked twice, but she didn't stop. And when she finished, the entire room stood up, including me. After the showcase ended, I stayed behind to clean up paintbrushes and fold chairs. Simone and Marcus pulled me into a tight, 3-person hug near the snack table. You killed it, Simone said. For real. I'm proud of you, Marcus added. I'd heard that phrase so rarely in my life that I didn't know how to react to it. But I let it sink in. I let it stay. That night, back in my room, I propped up a printed photo from the event. The crowd clapping, Kennedy grinning mid-bow, me clapping behind her with both hands in the air. I stared at it for a long time. I felt okay. And then my phone lit up. New text from Dad.
Hey.
Your mom saw a post about you speaking at some event. Said your name was on a flyer. We didn't know you were doing all that. That's cool. She wants to come visit. Maybe we can see the place. Just like that, my stomach flipped. Not because they wanted to come. because they only wanted to come now. Now that someone else had clapped. Now that my name had finally landed somewhere they couldn't ignore. I stared at the screen, fingers trembling. No apology. No acknowledgement of the silence. No mention of the call I still hadn't recovered from. Just an expectation. An invitation to let them back in without repair. I paced my room, phone in hand, fury building. They'd missed my scholarship banquet. They'd skipped my graduation speech. They hadn't called until the car broke down. And now that a flyer with my name on it got more attention than my college diploma ever had, they wanted a tour. I didn't reply. Not that night. Instead, I sat down at my desk and pulled out a blank index card. On it, I wrote, "You don't get to rewrite my story now that the ending is better than you expected." I pinned it next to Kennedy's drawing, right beside Simone's sticky note. Because I wasn't doing this for them anymore. I was doing it for every version of me they left waiting at the curb. They showed up on a Sunday. No text. No warning. No heads up. Just a knock. 3 taps, soft, spaced out like hesitation disguised as politeness. I was in the middle of folding laundry, Kennedy's thank you card still open on my desk from the showcase the night before. When I opened the door, there they were. My father in his usual work boots and windbreaker. My mother in the same faded lipstick she wore to church potlucks. Neither of them smiling. "Elaine," my mom said, like my name was a surprise in her mouth. "Hi." I didn't move. I didn't open the screen door. I just stood there barefoot on the threshold, heart hammering in my chest. "Can we come in?" she asked. "Why?" I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. My dad scratched the back of his neck. "Saw your name online. Thought it'd be nice to see where you've been." "You thought?" I repeated. "We're trying, Elaine," my mother said quickly. "We didn't know how involved you were in all this." It's impressive. Impressive. Like I was a science fair project they hadn't expected to win regionals. I looked down at my folded t-shirt in my hand, still warm from the dryer, then back at them. I could have let them in. Offered tea. Played the role. But I didn't. "I'm really busy," I said flatly. There was a silence, the kind that fills a hallway and sticks to your skin like humidity. My father spoke first. "Look, we came all this way. You could at least give us 10 minutes. "You mean the way I gave you 4 years?" I said. It slipped out, but I didn't regret it. "Elaine," my mom started. "No," I said, stepping out and closing the door behind me so they wouldn't try to walk past me. "Let's not pretend. You didn't come for me. You came for the story." They both blinked. "You saw the flyer. You heard people were clapping. Suddenly I'm worth a visit? But where were you at the graduation? Where were you when I called after I got my scholarship and you said, 'That's nice, but who's going to help with groceries now?'"
"We didn't know," my mom began.
"You knew," I interrupted. "You always knew. You just didn't care until there was something to be proud of.
And now?
Now you want credit for something you didn't build." My father crossed his arms. "You've always been dramatic. It's not that deep." And there it was. The line that had always been used to make me doubt my own memory. I felt the heat rise to my face, but this time, it wasn't shame. It was certainty. "You don't get to call it dramatic just because it makes you uncomfortable," I said. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. "Do you know what it felt like to walk off that stage and find no one there? Do you know what it felt like to win something and be told to stop acting like it's a Grammy?" They said nothing. Every time you didn't show up, I told myself it was my fault. That maybe I hadn't earned it yet. That if I got a better grade or a better job or a better attitude, then you'd finally see me. I looked my mother dead in the eye. "But I stopped chasing crumbs. And I'm not letting you waltz into the bakery now that the table's set." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I'm not saying we didn't make mistakes," she muttered. "It's not about mistakes," I replied. "It's about patterns. It's about showing up only when it's convenient or when you think you can take a bow for something you had no hand in." My dad rolled his eyes. "So, what, this is it? You just cut us out forever?" "No," I said. "But you don't get full access to a life you never invested in. You don't get to skip the work and show up at the celebration. They looked stunned. My voice didn't shake. My knees didn't buckle. I stood there, firm, the same way I had stood behind that podium at the showcase, with nothing to prove, just something to reclaim. After a long pause, my mom said quietly, "Well, I guess we'll head out." I didn't stop them. She took a step, then turned back. "You look good," she said. Groan. I didn't smile. I am. They left without asking for a photo, without trying to hug me, and I let them go. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, still in the same jeans, the same t-shirt, the same skin that had once ached to be enough for those two people. Simone knocked softly before entering. She'd heard the whole thing through the window. She handed me a cup of hot chocolate. No words, just presence. And sometimes that's the loudest kind of love. The next morning, I got a message from Patrice. "I want you to apply for the new Youth Advocacy Fellowship. We need leaders like you guiding the next round of programming." I stared at the screen for a long time, letting the meaning settle. She didn't say I was a hard worker. She didn't say I had potential. She said leader. The word fit like a coat I hadn't known I'd grown into. I hit reply.
Count me in.
The fellowship announcement went live on a Tuesday morning. VOIJ posted a photo of me shaking hands with Patrice, both of us beaming beneath a banner that read, "Elaine Carter, 2023 Youth Advocacy Fellow." The caption read, "From intern to leader, Elaine's journey is a testament to resilience, compassion, and voice-driven change. We're lucky to have her." My phone lit up instantly. Mentions,
Tags,
reposts. Former professors, high school classmates, even old roommates were sharing the post with captions like, "So proud of Elaine. Always knew she was going places. We love to see a hometown girl win. Funny how people remember you differently when you've made something out of yourself." I scrolled through the comments, equal parts overwhelmed and suspicious. And then I saw it. A post from my mother's Facebook. She had shared my announcement, along with an old photo of me in my middle school science fair blazer. Her caption? "My daughter, the advocate. So proud. Always knew you were special." I stared at the screen cold. This from the woman who left my graduation before the speech. Who asked for money when I hadn't even unpacked in DC. Who hadn't once said, "I'm sorry," without a string attached. And now she was collecting likes off the version of me she never clapped for? It wasn't the post that hurt. It was the rewrite. The way she tried to fold herself into the narrative, like she'd always been there. As if applause erased absence. Simone found me hunched over the desk, my hands clenched so tightly around my phone the case had gone warm. She didn't ask what happened. She just raised her eyebrows and waited. I turned the screen to her. She read it, winced, then said, "Want me to egg her page?" I laughed, sharp and bitter. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel," I muttered. She never showed up when it mattered, but now she wants the photo op. Simone leaned against the doorway. "You're allowed to feel whatever you feel. The problem is, you were trained to feel guilt for not letting people borrow your shine after they dimmed your light." That line sat with me all day. Borrow your shine. I kept picturing it, hands reaching for a candle they never helped light. That night, I drafted a post of my own. I wasn't going to tag her. I wasn't going to clap back in the comments. But I was going to say something.
for me.
And for anyone who needed to read it. This isn't just about a title. It's about walking away from the rooms where you were told to whisper. And building one where you can speak without shrinking. Some of us didn't grow up with cheerleaders. We learned to clap for ourselves. And that's enough. I hit post. Didn't wait to see who liked it. Didn't need permission to feel proud anymore. The next day, Marcus pulled me into his office. "You ready for the hard part?" he asked. I blinked. "What's that?" "Being seen. Really seen. It's harder than being invisible. Because now people expect things from you. Or try to claim pieces of your story they didn't earn." I nodded slowly. "Be kind," he added, "but stay guarded. You worked for this. Don't hand it away just to make someone else feel comfortable." I thanked him and walked out with those words etched into my spine. That Friday, Kennedy stayed after the workshop again. She was working on a poem she'd titled The Version of Me That Speaks. Asked her if she wanted feedback. She shook her head. I just want you to hear it. She stood up, voice small but steady. The version of me that speaks. Doesn't whisper for approval. She stands in doorways made of no's. And answers herself yes. She's not loud. She's just not hiding anymore. I clapped. Not because it was polished. Not because it was perfect. But because it was true. She blushed, sat down, and asked, You ever wish you could go back and tell your younger self it gets better? I didn't even hesitate. No, I said. Because I wouldn't want her to wait around for someone to save her. I want her to know. She saves herself. Kennedy smiled wide. And in that moment I realized something. This was the legacy I was building. Not titles. Not posts. But mirrors. Reflecting back to these girls the strength no one reflected for me. That night, I got a text from my sister. Saw Mom's post. Just wanted you to know. I see what you've done. I'm sorry we didn't clap sooner. It was unexpected. And maybe too late. But I replied, Thanks. I hope you mean it. No emoji. No heart. Just enough to leave the door cracked. Not open. Not closed. Just honest. It started with an email. Subject line, Elaine, we'd love you to speak. Sender, Pennsylvania Youth Engagement Summit. Patrice had forwarded it to me with a single line. Your hometown's watching. Want to show them what you've built? At first, I didn't answer. I read it, closed it, reopened it, read it again. Then I walked around my apartment for 20 minutes before sitting back down and typing.
Yes.
The conference was being held just 20 minutes from Allentown, technically a different city, but close enough that every part of it felt like memory. I hadn't been back since I left. Not really. I'd driven through it once on a bus that didn't stop. Watched my old block blur past the window like a ghost with its back turned. But this time would be different. This time, I wasn't driving through.
I was standing in it.
The flight in was quiet. I didn't pack much. Just my laptop, a black blazer, and a single folded photo. Kennedy, mid-recital, with me clapping behind her, both of us smiling like we had no idea how rare that kind of joy was. The conference hotel was exactly the kind of place you'd expect for an education summit, fluorescent lights, low ceilings, and water pitchers that never seemed full. But my room had a view of the autumn trees, fiery and unapologetic, and that alone made it feel like a victory. The keynote was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. I arrived Thursday to prep. But something was tugging at me. A thought.
A dare.
A voice that whispered, You say you're free. Prove it. Go home. I didn't have to. No one would know if I didn't. But I would.
So I did.
Friday morning, I rented a car and drove to Allentown. The second I pulled onto the highway, my hands got clammy. The roads were the same. The same pothole near exit 36. The same faded diner sign that hadn't worked since I was in 10th grade. Everything was smaller. That's what surprised me most. The streets. The houses. The fear. I drove past my old high school. The marquee still read, Homecoming game Saturday, go Hawks, like nothing had changed. I didn't stop. Not yet. Instead, I drove to my old neighborhood. Parked across the street from the duplex where I'd grown up. It was the first time I'd seen it in daylight since I left for DC. Unit 2B still had the dent in the screen door. Still had the crooked mailbox. The curtains were different, but the porch light still flickered like a forgotten memory. I didn't get out of the car. I just sat there and whispered, You did it. Not to show off. To honor the girl who had studied at that chipped kitchen table, who had written scholarship essays between interruptions, who used to play crowd applause through headphones because she never heard it in real life. You did it. Without them. Without the claps. Without the parade. You became the person they didn't make room for. As I pulled away, something caught my eye. A flyer taped to a telephone pole at the corner. Weather-worn but legible. Allentown High School Alumni Night. Saturday at 6:30, gymnasium. I wasn't planning to go. But then I heard myself think it. What if I don't go for them? What if I go for her? The version of me who sat in those classrooms. who left campus crying after being told her personality was too much. Maybe she deserved to walk those halls one last time. Not in shame, but in full. Saturday morning, the summit was electric. Panels on youth leadership, civic engagement, trauma-informed advocacy. I spoke after lunch. The room was packed, teachers, counselors, college students, and a few parents in the back row. They introduced me as a former local student turned advocate, and my feet nearly froze walking up to the podium. But then I remembered Kennedy, her poem, her voice, and I began. My name is Elaine Carter. I grew up just 20 minutes from here, in a town where I was told to lower my voice, to smile smaller, to be less proud of what I loved. I used to think success meant leaving places like this and never coming back. But now I know it means returning on your own terms, not to prove you belong, but to remind yourself that you always did. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was real. A teacher stopped me on the way to the hallway. "You spoke the way I wish I had learned to listen," she said. I didn't know how to answer. So I smiled and whispered thank you. That evening, just before dusk, I drove to the alumni mixer. The gym looked exactly the same. White tile floors, squeaky bleachers, championship banners still hanging crookedly overhead. I nearly turned around, nearly walked out before anyone saw me. And then I heard my name. Elaine Carter? I turned. There she was. Ms. Alden, my 10th grade English teacher. Same auburn scarf. Same warm eyes. Same tilted head when she smiled. I hadn't seen her in over 8 years. "Oh my goodness," she said, walking over. "You've grown into your voice." That line nearly broke me. I hugged her without thinking. "You were the first one who said I had something to say," I said. "You did," she replied. "You always did. You just didn't have many people brave enough to listen." We sat on the bleachers for nearly an hour. She asked about the summit, about my work, about the students. When I told her about Kennedy and the superhero drawing, her eyes softened. "You know," she said, "you weren't too much, Elaine. You were just surrounded by people too small to hold you." My throat tightened. "I always thought it was me," I admitted, "that I was the problem." She shook her head.
No, love.
"You were the signal in a room full of static." That night, I drove back to the hotel and wrote a letter, not to her, not to my parents, not to Kennedy, to myself. "Dear Elaine, you waited so long to be chosen, to be clapped for, to be told you were enough. But you've become the kind of woman who no longer waits.
You speak.
You build.
You stay.
And that's more than survival. That's freedom." I folded the note and tucked it into my notebook behind Simone's sticky note. I was building a wall of proof that healing doesn't always require permission. Sometimes it just takes a return. Not to be welcomed back, but to say, "I don't need to be." I landed back in DC on a quiet Sunday afternoon. No fanfare, no banner, just the sound of the train groaning to a stop and a breeze that carried the first hints of winter. The city didn't know where I'd been, but I did. And I knew I wasn't coming back the same. I didn't race home. I walked, slowly, deliberately, past the mural I'd passed every morning, past the corner store where the cashier always gave me a discount without asking, past the community center glowing faintly in the early evening light. And when I turned the key to my apartment and stepped inside, it felt different. Not because anything had changed, but because I had. Simone was sitting cross-legged on the couch, her laptop open and a bowl of cereal in her hand. When she saw me, she lifted her spoon in a mock toast. To the woman who conquered her past, she said, mouth full of Cheerios. I smiled, dropped my bag, and sat beside her. "I didn't conquer it," I said quietly. "I just stopped letting it sit in the front row." She nodded, thoughtful. "That's harder." We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. The silence wasn't heavy, it was full. Full of understanding. Full of space. Full of safety. And that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead, I realized this was the first time in my life I wasn't waiting for a message. Not from my mom. Not from my dad. Not from anyone. There was no apology I needed, no validation I was chasing. Just breath, just quiet, just me. Work picked up quickly the following week. The Voices Rising girls were preparing for their winter performance, a night of storytelling, spoken word, and original music. Kennedy was working on a new poem called Permission Slips. She said it was about how we wait for other people to say go before we move. "You're in it," she told me, cheeks flushed as she handed me a draft. "I say you gave me my first permission slip." I nearly cried. Not because I wanted to be a hero, but because I spent so long being invisible, and now, here, my presence was a mirror for someone else's light. Then, on a random Thursday afternoon, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text. A real envelope with real handwriting, smudged at the corners. No return address, but I knew the script. My mother. I held it in my hands for a full 5 minutes before opening it. Not out of fear, but out of care. Because I wasn't going to let it undo me. Inside was a card. Nothing fancy. Just white with silver edging and a small line of cursive that read, "Thinking of you." The message inside was short. "Elaine, I don't know how to say what you deserve to hear, but I'm trying. I saw the video of your speech at the summit. Your words, they stayed with me. I won't pretend I showed up the way I should have. But I'm here now, even if it's from a distance. You're building something beautiful. I hope someday you'll let me witness it in person. Love, Mom." I read it once, then again, and then a third time. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough to rebuild everything. But it wasn't manipulation. It wasn't guilt. It was maybe, finally, an opening. I didn't respond right away. I left the card on my desk, between Kennedy's latest drawing and the index card where I'd once written, "You don't get to rewrite my story now that the ending is better than you expected." But I wasn't sure this was a rewrite. It felt more like an asterisk. A footnote that said, "Trying."
Slowly.
A week later, I was asked to give another talk, this time at a local high school just outside the city. They wanted me to speak to juniors about college, purpose, and what it meant to lead. As I stood in front of the room, I scanned the audience. Some students leaned back in their chairs. Others stared blankly. But one girl in the second row, dark braids, hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands, locked eyes with me the whole time. She didn't blink. She didn't fidget. She just watched. And so I spoke to her. I used to think that strength looked like perfection, that success meant never being soft. But now I know strength is showing up. It's telling the truth before you're applauded. It's making peace with the people who hurt you, even if you do it from a safe distance. Afterward, the girl from the second row approached me. She didn't say anything at first, just held out a folded piece of notebook paper. I opened it. "I've never heard someone talk like that before. You made me feel like maybe I don't have to disappear to survive." I looked up. She was still there.
"You don't," I said.
"You just have to start choosing you, even when it's quiet." She nodded and walked away. And I stood there, letter in hand, knowing I'd just become someone's first permission slip, too. That night, I came home to Simone already making dinner, spaghetti and garlic bread. We sat on the floor, plates in our laps, and ate in front of the TV while reruns of some terrible sitcom played in the background. It felt like home, not because it was big, not because it was loud, but because it asked nothing of me except to show up. And that's what I'd spent my whole life searching for. Not a spotlight, just a space. As I got ready for bed, I placed my mother's card in a drawer, not out of sight, just not in the center of everything. Some love lives at the edges. And that's okay. I looked at the collage on my wall one more time. Simone's sticky note, Kennedy's drawing, the photo from the showcase, the folded speech from my first keynote, and my own letter to myself, a tapestry of becoming, a record of every time I stayed when I wanted to leave. And as I turned out the light, I whispered aloud, "The legacy I leave begins with me." Not with applause, not with reconciliation, but with showing up. For myself, for the girls watching, for the girl I used to be,